mistakes aren't detrimental, right? When a kid is never allowed to make a mistake, then mistakes have a stigma to them, right? It becomes wrong to make a mistake. Mistakes are never talked about. I'm protected from them. So when I finally do inevitably make a mistake or encounter some kind of obstacle, it's devastating. It's way more devastating, and you just have a harder time handling it. So if I was to blanket statement every parent and kid, it would be try your hardest to let a kid be who they are within clear boundaries.
Welcome to The Golf Parent, where you get access to the best minds in junior golf. I'm your host, Ryan Adams, and my guest today is golf psychology coach and host of the fantastic Mental Golf Show podcast, Josh Nichols. Josh has 18 years of competitive golf experience. He's competed in 6 USGA events, has 3 NCAA Division I wins, and he was the 2017 US Mid-Am runner-up. Josh now coaches high-level juniors, college athletes, and professionals, and he specializes in the foundations of mental performance, the mental, emotional, and psychological parts of golf.
Yes, I started when I was 12, and because of my dad, he got me into it. I wish I started earlier. I kind of dabbled in it when I was like 6 years old. I played baseball from when I was 6 to 12. So I went probably once or twice with my dad between 6 and 12. So it was like, I loved it every time I went because I was with him, but I didn't really care to do it until I like hated baseball and said, I need to try something else where the ball is still, I guess. I was scared of hitting the ball. Like I was scared of batting, right? It's that we had a really powerful pitcher on our team. So every time we'd practice, that pitcher would pitch to us. And I mean, at like 10 years old, he was throwing 70 miles an hour, and it was terrifying. So I was afraid to get hit. So I wasn't good at it. It was just like not fun. And I think maybe my dad was trying to live through me a little bit with baseball, because I know he grew up playing it or something. I remember seeing a really old picture of him holding a baseball bat. So there might have been that element to it. So maybe he eventually was able to let that go and let me kind of choose what I wanted to do. And he also played golf, so natural fit there. But yes, I desperately wish I started earlier than just 12, but as it turned out, I started when I was 12.
Yeah, and you still had quite a bit of success. I mean, there's we talked at the beginning of the episode about kind of your bio and your background, but it's impressive what you were able to accomplish. So maybe let's start there. So first of all, Josh, I want to welcome you onto the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So
yeah, it's so good to be here. I appreciate it. It's an honor. Thank you.
That's awesome. So let's start at the beginning then. So if you were to instill a championship mindset in a young kid, so let's go back maybe to young Josh, what would you suggest from a parent's point of view that they could do to help instill the tools that young boy or girl will need, not only in their competitive career, but just the long-lasting downstream effect in being a human or an adult?
Yeah, I think what I've learned and experienced, I guess it started as experience and has turned into, now I've learned a ton of stuff and realized, okay, what I experienced is not so crazy. It's, research-based and whatnot, is autonomy and independence as a kid from the parent. Now, I mean, just as recently as this morning, I was reading about this, where having kind of clear boundaries of, you can't go outside these boundaries, from a parent to a kid. Here's, you can move freely within these boundaries and be who you want to be and make your own decisions, and also encounter your own consequences of your decisions up to a certain point, right? You can't drive off to out of state and move when you're 13, right? So sure. Like within certain boundaries, having autonomy, and that autonomy allows a kid to make mistakes, but also learn that mistakes aren't detrimental, right? When a kid is never allowed to make a mistake, then mistakes have a stigma to them, right? It becomes wrong to make a mistake. Mistakes are never talked about. I'm protected from them. So when I finally do inevitably make a mistake or encounter some kind of obstacle, it's devastating. It's way more devastating, and you just have a harder time handling it. So if I was to blanket statement every parent and kid, it would be try your hardest to let a kid be who they are within clear boundaries. And we have he's a year old, a year and 9 months. So we have a little guy that we're in the middle of learning all this. Thank you. And my wife is reading a book called Boundaries with Kids, I think is what it's called. And she sends me screenshots all the time of all these things. And I'm reading a book called Emotional Agility. And I'm in the middle of a chapter where she's like raising emotionally agile children or something. It's not a book about children. She's just randomly talking about how to raise kids well. And all of these things kind of point in that direction of kids are meant to make their own decisions. Kids are meant to push boundaries and express themselves and show emotions and get angry and be super happy and be loud and be however and be artistic or whatever, or quiet and whatever. And all of those things are great. So the more a parent tries to steer and control that, it seems like the worse things turn out. Yeah.
And that makes sense. Now, there almost seems like there's a contradiction here in the sense of, let's just say we have a young golfer who's picked up the game, is passionate about it, and maybe they're throwing some temper tantrums, they're throwing their clubs, they're pouting, things. I mean, golf's a hard game, right? Things don't always go your way, and they've got behavior that you're wanting to kind of correct while also working within the confines of allowing their individuality to kind of come out. What would be your suggestion then of how to instill kind of focusing those emotions in a productive way as opposed to a destructive way?
Yes, that is a probably the biggest obstacle to this is how far do I let this emotion go? And we deal with this on a daily, hourly, minutely basis is, okay, you're yelling a lot. You're expressing yourself, but also chill. So I think where it comes down to is not so much as, are you allowed to express the anger? Are you allowed to initiate the tantrum? It's how does the parent help the kid work through it? And one of the things that the Emotional Agility book talks about is when a kid is allowed to express emotions, they also develop the ability to self-regulate their emotions. So they can express their emotions and learn how to navigate them and learn these are the consequences when I express a temper tantrum and just an outright snap a club. Well, the parent has their boundaries and says, you can't, I'm not just going to buy you another club just because you snapped a club. So your emotions, you're allowed to express emotions, but if your emotions lead to consequences, then those consequences are there for a reason. So the parent has the responsibility of setting clear boundaries, and the kid can express emotions, but they will encounter consequences if their emotions push themselves outside of that boundary. And if it has to be, if the parent has to be very explicit with the boundary that says, okay, you are not allowed to, vocally yell out of frustration, and then be very clear. And I've actually, sorry for the tangent, but I also run a junior golf league here in the state during the summer. So we're right in the middle of it. And I think it was last summer, one of the regular kids that played in all of our tournaments, his parents, I guess they would be termed strict, I guess we would call them. But the kid had a notoriously strong temper, short fuse. So he would get mad and they would give him one warning. Okay, that's that's it. If you do that again, we're out of here. And most parents, that's kind of empty words, and they would just kind of keep getting mad. But they walked to us at scoring and said, we're withdrawing because he got mad and now we're leaving. So they pulled their kid out of the tournament because he crossed their boundary. Now there is,
fantastic. I'm just going to go on the record because you need those strong boundaries, because you need to know that there's consequences, and especially as a parent, there's something to be said. In this day and age, obviously nobody's using any sort of physical repercussions to their children. Nobody's spanking or, belts. And I got spanked for sure. And that was a repercussion because, you get that look, you're like, ooh, there's a physical consequence, which we don't do anymore. But if there is no consequence to the words, then they're just hollow. And then, like you said, the child's natural desire is to push those boundaries. So keep pushing to see where the walls are in their little reality.
Yes. So this was a really good example of a parent saying, these are our boundaries, and if you cross this, this will be the consequence, not generic. This will be the consequence. We will yank you. And I didn't hear that conversation happen, but I'm assuming that's how it was. Now, if they didn't communicate this is what would happen and did it anyway, then that might not be the best way to go either. But the idea here is they set a boundary and he crossed it, and they enacted the consequence. And if you, I guess the individual liberty of a parent now is, okay, where do we set the boundary? That might sound extra harsh to a lot of people. That might not sound harsh enough to a lot of people. I don't know. But I guess that's where the individual parenting style comes in. Sure. But the value is, you're allowed to do whatever you want to an extent within these boundaries. And if you cross them, here's the consequences.
Now, what happened to that child? Did he play in another tournament? Did he learn to regulate his emotions? Like, did that ever happen again?
I don't think it did. Not
to your knowledge.
And he hasn't played any tournaments this summer. I don't know if he graduated, but last summer I do know that he was that never happened again. I didn't follow him every hole to see how he was. And I don't know if he did the same thing and they kind of lightened up on him, but he seemed much more even keeled when he was around me. And I think he played better for it. I can't attest to it. He had his own, he could be completely inward with his frustration. And that's still, and we could talk about that, but that still has its own effect on your game. And their boundary was not, what are you doing inside your head? It was what's coming out. So he had his own probably issues to work through internally.
So let's give a practical tip then to all the listeners. So you've got a child that is showing some sort of, we'll say, lack of emotional regulation on the course. What tools or tips could you arm them with, which they then can instill in their child to be able to work through it? So I'm thinking breath work. I'm thinking of letting things go, the 15-second rule or 5-second rule. Like, what have you seen to be effective?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and this would be more of a general principle than maybe a specific tip, would be kind of naming it or speaking through it or talking through the emotion, and basically having an awareness of it, a recognition of it. And so that you're not just angry and stay angry and never realize that you're angry, and you just kind of, your emotions now dictate your actions. Instead, it's more of a express your emotion and then, okay, now let's talk through it. And if a parent can do that with their kid enough, then it probably would become to the kid just a normal technique to do every time they experience an emotion is, okay, I'm not just acting mindlessly and just yelling and being angry and being emotionally dysregulated. I'm able to notice that I'm emotionally dysregulated and can bring myself back down to that 5 out of 10, right? So I was up at a 10 and I can try to work myself back down to a 5 just by talking myself through it. And I guess the term might be, I guess, what would it be? It's like where you separate yourself from the emotion.
Associate.
You disassociate. Good. I should know that, but you should where you can say, I am feeling angry rather than I'm
I'm
angry.
not,
Right.
but I'm not angry.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm experiencing anger, I'm experiencing frustration, or I'm experiencing worry. I'm experiencing these emotions, which allows you to hold them kind of at arm's length, and they're much more transient that way, right? They can come and go. Yeah.
So I think that's probably the big takeaway right there, is to help your child to be able to disassociate themselves from the actual emotion, which allows them to then choose whether or not they want to carry that emotion or let it down. And
Right.
if you can't disassociate it, and I'm also assuming, now again, I'm not a neuroscientist or a psychologist by trade, but I'm assuming that by doing that as well, it'll also activate a different part of your brain, because you won't be in that seeing red reptilian, like, I am angry. You're more in the cerebral being like, no, I'm feeling anger. Interesting. Let me observe that emotion or allow it to just kind of flow through me. And then I can choose my next response or my next emotion from there.
Yeah, you're nailing it. Yeah, it would be the kind of limbic system versus kind of the prefrontal cortex system, right? So the prefrontal cortex would be what would be called the kind of the newer brain, the slower brain, the more thoughtful brain. And when you're in that anger, emotion, kind of immediate gut response, you're back in the limbic system, that it's much faster and much more survival related. But if you can slow down, literally slow down by breathing or by slowing your pace down or by taking a sec to just notice things around you. And here's where a practical tip could be is to use your five senses, right? To actually notice what you're feeling. Notice the feeling of the ground under your feet. Feel the breath going in and out of your nose. What are you hearing? Listen to the birds, tap in and really hear. What are you tasting, right? Take a drink of water and really taste it and notice it. All of those things bring your attention to here, to the present. They ground you instead of your brain just off doing its thing, trying to predict the future to help you survive and whatever. You're able to literally slow down and bring you into that kind of more conscious, thoughtful state. Yeah, you're nailing it with the brain neuroscience part.
Which we all understand is when we play better golf, is when we're in that state. But let's really confuse people for a second, because what I keep hearing is that when you're taking a golf shot, though, and when you're standing over it, you really want to occupy the prefrontal cortex with some other thought, because that's the part of the brain that's usually worried about the consequences, the fear, like, what if I do slice it into the trees? What if I do hit that water? And so there's lots of, it seems like, ways that we're trying to occupy that so that we can allow that natural athletic ability, more, I guess, that early kind of part of our brain to take over and just execute the shot based on a very simple, like, go after the target and don't overthink it.
Yeah. So and this is why there's not a clear boundary between both parts of the brain, right? They kind of work together to, so as you and probably everyone listening to this now has now heard a million times, is kind of the brain's natural instinct is to help us survive. And its way of doing that is to try to use the past to predict the future. And that's one way that it does it. And part of that in golf is, think of all the times that we've been in a similar situation and we hit a shot that led to some kind of negative experience, internal experience. So our brain perceived it as a threat from then on. And so now when you're on this tee shot, your brain is using all this information to say, okay, that's bad, that's a threat, don't go there, don't do that. So that would be called a mindless activity that your brain is doing, right? So that your brain is kind of doing that on autopilot. But once you kind of inject some awareness and do that kind of slowing down process and that very conscious, present related process of, okay, what am I feeling? What am I doing? What do I need to do right now? that's where you can land the prefrontal cortex part of your brain, the actual conscious awareness part of your brain, and anchor it there so that your brain isn't off doing whatever mindless thing it's doing. So most people cannot just hit a golf shot blank, completely blank. No one is ever completely blank. You would be dead, right? As this book said, that would be, that's a dead person trait, right? So the way, I think the most productive way would be to anchor your brain on something present related. So for most people, that's a swing thought or a swing feel of some kind. Or for me, it's on short game shots. It's kind of keeping the picture of the target in mind while I'm hitting the shot. So I'm not, so instead of letting my brain mindlessly worry about, don't chunk it, don't do this, don't do that, which are just thoughts, I'm bringing my brain to the present and anchoring it somewhere where I do want it to be. So it takes that conscious, mindful process to take us out of that kind of threat detection mode that we do on autopilot. And yes, our brain has that tendency to do that. And when we're at our best, when we're in that flow state, we don't feel like we're doing much mentally, right? We're definitely not worried about all the places we don't want to go, or things are very simple. Things are very task oriented, right? What do I have to do here? Just as simply as that. What do I have to do to get this ball to go there? And so there's less going on in that flow state, right?
That makes a lot of sense. What would you suggest is the best way to get better at golf? And let's maybe look at practice for a second. Like, what's the best way to be mindful with our practice? You hear a lot about block practice versus random practice. What's your observation? What's your experience? What would you suggest is an efficient way to just get better at golf, especially for a younger golfer?
Yeah, the way that I got to my best was a balance of block, random, and challenge practice. As those are the three terms that I use. Other people might say block.
That aren't familiar with those three different types?
Yeah, I shouldn't just brush right over that. So block practice, to me, in my definition, is kind of hitting to the same target with the same club, kind of trying to perform the same task over and over and over again. And this is what most people do all the time, but it would be, put an alignment rod down. I'm hitting to the 150 flag on the range with my 8-iron, boom, 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 just over and over, not kind of rake and hit, right? I rake a ball over, hit a ball, hit a ball, hit a ball. And that, in my experience, should take about half of your practice, should be that 50% of the time that you are practicing, not playing. Playing is a whole different thing, but within the time that you're practicing, 50% of your time roughly should be, I'm working on the skill of how to hit this club, right? Like a violinist would be trying to play a song really, really slowly and trying to hit every note perfectly, right? So when you're, instead of a violinist trying to challenge themselves, they're trying to do things perfectly.
Precision.
So, right, precision. And when you are doing block practice, you're trying to do it perfectly, right? You're trying to hit good shots, right? You're trying to hit good shots, or if you're not trying to hit good shots, you're trying to make a good swing. You're not really challenging yourself per se. You're saying, okay, this is what I want to train my body to do, and I'm going to try to do it every time. So that's block practice, where same club, same target, same task over and over and over again. So that's block practice. Challenge, let's go random. Random practice next is basically the most like the golf course. So that's a different target, different club, different shot choice every time, and going through your full routine every time. So you could make it as easy as, I'm just going to play through a golf course on the range. So I'm going to hit driver, 7-iron, pitch shot, 3-wood, 4-iron. So just bouncing around clubs, different targets, so that you're challenging your brain to not just, it's not so easy to hit a shot anymore. Right now, there's a little bit of variability to it. There's some randomness, right? So maybe even you don't get the ball onto a good lie. You kind of drop the ball and let it nestle wherever it's going to nestle and do that. So that's random. Different club, different target, different shot choice every time. And that's 25% of your practice, I think. And then the last 25% is challenge. Or as my old instructor who taught me all this, Robert Linville, he called it scrimmage practice. So that's you give yourself a task to accomplish or a challenge to accomplish, and you try to do it. So his thing was always, okay, hit 18 shots to a target. You got to get 14 shots within a 25-foot circle and go, right? So do that for 18 shots or on 18 putts. So 6 putts around this hole from 8 feet, 6 around this, 6 around this, and you got to make 60% of them or something. And that one is going through your full routine. But the difference between that and random is you're more so doing the same thing over and over again, but this time it has kind of a one ball mentality where I'm trying to hit just this one shot, full routine, and there's a pressure element to it, right? I'm trying to accomplish
an element of a consequence in there, which is
yes.
almost mirrors, and especially if you have to reset the drill if you miss it, then you're actually a little bit of the pressure you'd feel in a race.
Yes. Yeah. So that practice, to me, practice planning was probably, if not the biggest, I think it was probably the most influential part of my journey that actually got me to as good as I was able to get, was practice planning and varying my practice that way. Not just, I'm just working on how to hit a driver straight. I'm varying my practice because I think it has a mental component to, I'm stretching my brain. I'm pushing it outside of its comfort zone. I'm not just doing something I'm good at all the time or even something that's easy. I'm doing things that are difficult. And that's a key component of deliberate practice where I'm always doing things that are just outside my comfort zone. I'm failing just often enough to make my mind have to adapt and improve. So that type of practice, I mean, it's uncomfortable and boring and slower and maybe not as exhilarating and fun, but that's kind of the way to get better.
And so there's so many different questions here, but I want to keep this a little bit focused here. So staying in the vein of practice, what you described seems like a perfect way for somebody to just get better when they're on the range, when they're just practicing in general. How does this differ then when someone's getting ready for a tournament and someone's trying to play something very specific with a specific course, a specific end goal, which is to score as high as possible or as low as possible and to rank it as possible?
Yeah. So I kind of like a kind of a ramping down or ramping up, however you look at it, of block random challenge. As you get closer to a competition, you would decrease your amount of block practice and increase your amount of random. And you might even decrease your amount of challenge because the closer you get to a tournament or to a competitive round, the more random that competitive round is going to be, right? So your practice needs to be more random, I think, to kind of ready you for it, to take you out of that constant technical mode where I'm always working on things and I'm always thinking about how do I need to move this club through the air? And instead, how do I need to get this ball to the target? So shifting into that mode towards as you get closer to a competitive round, I think is valuable. And I mean, you could make this numerical. You could say, okay, I've got 2 weeks until a Friday, Saturday, Sunday tournament, Thursday practice round, whatever. And so for the first week, I'm going to do that 50, 25, 25. And then for the next 2 days, I'm going to bring down block and raise random and challenge. And then for the next 2 days, I'm going to do almost no block and a bunch of random and a little bit of challenge. And then the day before the practice round, I'm going to maybe just do a little bit of random, none of the other stuff, maybe a little bit of the other stuff, but whatever, mostly random. And then I'm going to go play 9. and then I'm going to go do the practice round, and then I'm going to go play the tournament. So, and you should be playing throughout all of that. But as far as practice goes, you are staying with block practice early on because you need to develop that skill, develop that foundational skill, but then decreasing it as you get closer to the tournament. And this might slow, or it might feel like overall improvement is slower, right? I'm trying to make a swing change or something, and I don't want to stop working on it just because it's the week of a tournament. You don't have to, but I think in order to play your best in that tournament, to let go of the swing change for just this few days and say, okay, I'll get back to that after this tournament. But for now, I'm preparing for this tournament. And my swing change might take longer over time, but the slow, steady nature of it, I think, will be a smoother curve up, rather than all I do is work on technique and then I kind of crash into a tournament and all I'm thinking about is my technique all tournament. And then I get frustrated and so then I get burnt out because every time I play, I struggle. So more of a slow, steady increase of your skill, right? Because you're pacing yourself, basically.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned all this is happening, and then you go do a practice round. What would be the intention of the practice round before a tournament? Like, what are you trying to get out of it? Are you looking at potential pin placements? Are you looking at, obviously, how to play the course? But maybe if you could share some strategies of what an efficient or an effective practice round actually looks like.
Yeah, so I might differ from a lot of people on this, because I like to play a practice round as much like a real round of golf as possible. And I mean, if you go watch a PGA Tour practice round, no PGA Tour player does what I'm doing. So you take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But the reason why I say that is when you play a practice round, and let's say, I mean, most amateurs and junior golfers especially are really only going to get one practice round before a tournament. So you're never going to learn everything about a golf course, right? A PGA Tour player might, especially the week of a major, is going to have probably 3 days of practice before a tournament, before that Thursday round. So they could theoretically learn almost everything about the golf course, but you just have 1 day. So what would be more valuable, to learn every nook and cranny of every possible chip shot or bunker shot or putt that you could have on any part of the green and hit 3 balls off every tee shot? Would that be more valuable, or to work on your ability to actually score and be comfortable going through your routine and trust that if I get into a spot, I know how to hit a chip shot, right? If I get into this spot on the green, one, I can't possibly predict all the spots I'm going to be, any possible spot I'm going to be on the green. But if I get onto this spot of the green, I can trust that the fact that I went through my routine in the practice round and learned how to read a green and felt the speed of just this one putt, that I think mentally prepares you for just the one putt that you're going to have on that green the next day. So I think developing more of that, again, back to the agility, I was talking about emotional agility earlier, the kind of mental agility to say, I can be anywhere on this course and I don't have to have seen it already to know that I can handle it. So that's how I like to do a practice round, is I'm basically going to play the whole round like a round. Maybe front 9, I'll hit some extra chips, but especially that last 3, 4, 5 holes, I'm playing as if I'm feeling like I'm in the tournament, so that by the time I get to the next morning, I know what it feels like to be on this course going through my routine.
It makes a lot of sense, actually, is to maybe give yourself the last, like you said, 3 or 4 holes, give yourself a little bit of a point, like I want to shoot -1 or -2 on these last 4 holes, really go after that, while giving yourself the opportunity to kind of maximize the different possibilities or probabilities for the first, X amount of holes as well.
Yeah, sorry, I know you wanted to ask another question, but what I see a ton of junior players do is they try to mimic what a PGA Tour player does, and they're hitting chip shots and stuff from everywhere. And then when they get in the actual tournament, they're not even in any of those places. And and now they have to, like, this is their one chance on this hole to hit a good shot from here. And they probably are thinking some kind of regretful thought of, man, I never took a ball over here and I never tried. So they lack the kind of mental agility to say, it doesn't matter that I haven't been here before. I believe in my ability. So what I've seen the best players do is, and I've played in, I think 6 USGA events, and I've played with USGA champions in those practice rounds. And one guy, a North Carolina guy, Scott Harvey, who won the US Mid-Am, and I remember a practice round with him, and in those last 3 or 4 holes, I noticed he was lining up putts, going through his routine, and holing out, not just breaking it and picking it up and going to another spot. He was really finishing out those holes. So junior golfers think, well, PGA Tour player does this, I need to do this. You got to do what's most important for you to play your best and adapt it for your own circumstances.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
As you transitioned into focusing more on the psychology of golf, what are some things like standouts that surprised you, where you're like, man, I wish I knew this when I was playing, or like, this totally makes sense, or this is counterintuitive to what seems to be the prevailing wisdom, but it seems to be this way. Like, maybe what are a couple interesting things that surprised you?
The practice planning one is huge. I was awful about it from the time I was 12 to when I was out of college, probably till I was about 25. I just hit balls over and over. I was trying to work on my own swing. I was trying to make it look good instead of get good instruction and trust the instructor that he or she knows what they're doing, because that's what they're paid to do, and that they've been doing it for years. And I am looking through my own biased lens at my own swing, having no clue what's going on, and I'm not good at it, even if I was not looking at my own swing. So trusting someone who knows what they're talking about, and then pacing myself with my practice and challenging myself with my practice and varying it and playing more. I did a lot of just block practice over and over and over again. So practice planning would be a huge one. I think from a psychology standpoint, it would be mistakes are okay. Failure is okay. When you're a kid and your whole childhood, you've been praised for results, or every time you get a good grade or something, I don't even know, do kids get grades anymore? I don't even know. But, every time you accomplish something that is good, right? You win something, or you get praised, right? You get clapped at, right? I run a junior tournament. When someone gets 3rd, 2nd, or 1st, I give them a medal and they get clapped at. And the guy that finishes 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and dead last, they don't get claps. So there's a clear delineation there between success and failure. And while I do not think everyone should get a medal, I do think that all the people that didn't get medals, just because they aren't being praised externally for rewards, does not mean that what they did was just binarily bad, right? So being able to delineate between, okay, yes, I failed from a end result standpoint. I didn't win, but just because it was a failure does not mean it was bad. I'm allowed to fail. I'm allowed to make mistakes. And when I was a kid, whether it was parents or just internal, as I've learned, it's mostly parents, but I don't want to put all the blame.
You're preaching to the choir here. Yeah.
Right. So I developed a mentality that failure is not okay. I'm not allowed to fail. And when I did, it was very disappointing. I was disappointed in myself. Even if no one said, you could just tell, right? You can tell body language. And I see parents still, because I run these junior tournaments, I see, and in my own players, I hear from them the pressure that they feel from their parents to, just on a shot by shot basis, right? If you miss the green, or you hit it into the woods, or you hit it into the water, or it seems like you were being too aggressive to that flag, even though the parent has no way of knowing where you were aiming, you just hit a bad shot. The body language is so clear. And when you hit a good one, they clap. So, yes, you should cheer on a player, but there's got to be and I don't know how to do this personally, but there's got to be a better way to praise effort and not just result, but still have the consequences that you didn't get the result that you wanted. So we need to find a way to work through that. And I never had that for myself when I was a kid, when I was a junior golfer, college golfer, out of college, until eventually I kind of just let all that go and said, okay, forget about results. I just don't care anymore. I just want to get better at golf. I just want to dedicate myself to the process of getting better. And through doing that, I did get better. And I wasn't so devastated every time I missed a cut or didn't play well. I was able to bounce back and learn from it better. And that I would sit down with my 12-year-old self and say, it's okay to fail. You are allowed to make mistakes. You're going to, right? Not just that you're allowed, you will. You're going to make way more mistakes than you're going to do good things. And it's okay. Be more okay with it and accept it. See it as it is. That would have, it would save me a lot of pain and eventual therapy, but it would have also accelerated my ability, right? It would have helped me to improve so much faster.
So I've learned from Dr. Raymond Pryor, who's been on the show, and
what are you doing having me on here then? You don't need me here.
No, are you kidding me? You're fantastic. You're real as well, and you learn from everybody. But one of the things that he had mentioned is to your exact point, was struggling of praising the result as opposed to an action. And he talked about the fact that if you focus on an action or a decision or something that the child had control over as opposed to a result that they did, that, for all the parents listening right now, that is the secret. It seems to be to disassociate the child from thinking that your love is conditional to how they score or the result, as opposed to something that is in their control, like, hey, that was a really good decision to, pitch it out of the woods instead of trying to go for that hero shot. Or I really liked how, even though the round wasn't going your way, that you stuck through your routine every time you putted. Certain things that then allow them to be like, yeah, that was really good. And that's the thing to praise as opposed to result. But it's so hard, because even little things, because what we're talking about here is the difference between a fixed or a growth mindset. And I know from my own childhood, I definitely had a fixed mindset, which means I was terrified to fail. And that plagues you later downstream, later as an adult, where you realize that you're going to protect yourself with a fear of failure or a fear of success, because your ego doesn't want to have a chance. Like you said, the ego's always trying to protect yourself. So it's trying not to put you in any situations where your view of yourself could be challenged. Like, maybe I'm not that actually good. Maybe I'm not that actually talented, or whatever it is. So therefore, I'm just not going to try, so I don't have to find out.
Right. Yeah, kind of that easy letdown. Yeah, the excuse, the kind of self-sabotage thing that's the end. That's the kind of the end symptom of when you're only praised for results, and therefore I only praise myself for results, and therefore I have to get a good result so that I'll get praise. Like you said, conditional love. So, my wife and I are always trying to work, and we pray about it, of like, how can we have more unconditional love for our son? I really struggle with this, and probably has to do with the way my parents related to me. Was when he is emotionally dysregulated, it dysregulates me. I really struggle with this. And when he does something good, I praise him, and I need to just do better at this all the time, because I'm not good at it yet. But I need to be able to see he's trying really hard, and he's frustrated, and that's okay, right? He's allowed to be frustrated. When I was a kid, I felt as if I wasn't allowed to get frustrated. I wasn't allowed to show disappointment or anger or sadness even. So allowing that allows a kid to also get to work through it and learn how to make the actions that can lead to just being a better golfer or a better person. So yeah, that's what you hit on there is just probably all of it, all in one little nugget, because that's it starts from that very bottom point, the very practical thing of praise the action, not the result, the controllable action. And that leads to so many other benefits or detriments.
Well, that is a huge part of why we're having these conversations. Is one of the unique kind of byproducts of becoming a parent, and my son Chase just turned 2 about a month ago, so he's right there with your son. And I didn't expect this, but becoming a parent, man, did it ever force me to take a hard look at my own childhood, my own limiting beliefs, my own baggage I inherited from who knows of generational trauma, all the rest of this that gets downloaded onto your parents, which then unconsciously they downloaded onto you as well. And you become crystal clear with like, whoa, our parents do a lot of good things, a lot of bad things. Most of it is ignorance. There's not a lot of diabolical, I'm going to choose to be, strange to my child, put him in a little cage or in the attic, like that. That's not what we're talking about here. But
right.
It's the unconscious actions that we don't realize that we're passing on to our kids. And I found that to be one of the most rewarding things about becoming a parent is that it forced me to take a look at my own patterns, my own stuff that I've been taking in, just so that I can be very conscious and aware of what do I want to pass on and what do I no longer want to. And if I don't want to pass this on to Chase, my son, I sure as hell better handle it now, because, I need to embody that which I want to actually pass on to him. And I found that to be really kind of unique and beneficial. And all the parents listening to this, like, this is kind of what we're doing here, is trying to figure out how do we best set up our child for success in life and in golf and anything they choose to do. And a big part of it just starts with our own self-awareness, know thyself.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's so well said. Being a parent has been easily the hardest thing that I've ever had to do, that me and my wife have ever had to do. And I don't, yes, the actual act of, changing diapers and, all the physical actions and packing things and all the craziness that has introduced into our lives. But I think that's secondary to the primary difficulty of facing myself and facing what I need to work through, and how much it's shown how all of my shortcomings, all the things that I need to work on. And because there's no clearer way than when he does something and I get angry, the amount of regret I feel for the way I acted and the way that I responded. I mean, it's my wife and I talk about it all the time of, he was really getting to me and I did this, or I snapped at him, or I yelled or something. And that's the thing that sticks with us, is that regret. So it's just such a clear mirror to, here's where you need to improve. And so all of the parents listening have an amazing opportunity to see, okay, the way that I act towards my kid is, if it's good, then that's the good parts of me. But if it's not good, then clearly it's something I need to work on. So thank you for this, that the conversations that you're having to hold that mirror up to parents. And I hope parents are humble and open enough to see it, to try to work on these things, because there's such a fine line between, you can do whatever you want, or you can do none of these things, right? You can express yourself completely, or you're not allowed to express yourself at all. There's so many nuances in there. And to have a guide like this is really, I wish I had this 2 years ago, right? I wish I was already knowing all this stuff. And I wish my parents had this 20 years ago. So yeah, this is essential stuff. Absolutely.
I appreciate your kind words, and I definitely appreciate you. There's an old proverb that says, I think it's a Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, right? Like it's better now than ever. And
yeah, good.
Josh, you're authentic. You're real. I'm a fan of yours. I'm a fan of your podcast.
Oh,
I've been for a while. The Mental Golf Show. I mean, other people that are listening, they're just like, okay, listen, this guy's got some value, and I want to learn more and be immersed in your world. What's the best way for people to find you and kind of get in touch?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, the Mental Golf Show podcast would be kind of the tent pole place that I pour most of my personal effort into. And then that branches off into X, Twitter, Instagram, those. And so Mental Golf Show podcast. And then on X, I'm Josh Luke Nichols. And on Instagram, I'm Josh Luke Nichols. And we're starting to do some stuff on YouTube. And I can't remember what that one is. Josh Luke Nichols or Josh Nichols Golf. I can't really remember. But those are the outlets for where I put out my stuff. So mostly X and podcast. Yeah.
And that's Nichols, Nichols, and Josh.
Yes.
J-O-S-H. Okay.
Yep.
Josh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. This is great. I really appreciate it. This is awesome.